I turned Among Us into a Fortnite Style Battle Royale, and Preston just uploaded a video using it. This is how I made it. How do you do? It's Mr. Moo. Storytime. So a few weeks ago, a YouTuber of the name Bendy approached me asking me to take an existing Unity project, which was a remade version of Among Us made by the Shelfman, asked me to mod this version of Among Us and turn it into a Battle Royale with guns, a storm, the whole works. And every time you do a task, you get guns or a way to heal yourself. After I finished it, he took this mod, gave it to Preston to use for a video, which has now just been released. So the first thing I needed to tackle was a way to track health and shield. So I added this health bar and shield tracker. For the storm, I did the opposite of what you might expect. I used a purple sprite in front of the whole map, which by the way was a massive image that combined several versions of the scaled map, including a SpongeBob and Pokemon version. Then I used a sprite mask that would slowly decrease in size as the storm got smaller. The sprite mask is just a shape that will block out part of the sprite showing. This made the storm look like it was closing in, when in reality the sprite mask just kept getting smaller and smaller. The way I did the damage was I put a trigger collider that is the same size and shape of the sprite mask, and I attached it to the sprite mask. And the logic behind it just said, if a player is within the circle, don't take any damage. So the default is actually for the player to be losing damage unless they are in the trigger collider. So that's a little different than the more intuitive idea that you'd be taking damage if you're in the storm rather than not losing damage if you're in the safe circle. But I didn't want to deal with the changing shape of the trigger on the outside of the circle, so this ended up just being easier. For guns and health, I grabbed some free sci-fi guns and food sprites from the asset store, and some fitting sound effects to go with. I set up an inventory hotkey setup where all the guns are dark and locked until you get them by doing tasks around the ship. Basically, the logic just says, if you complete a task, get a random gun or health. But if you don't have that gun, then unlock it. And if you already have that gun, you would just get ammo. So the 3 guns I added had different cooldown times, range, and damage. So the first gun I had was a pistol with medium range and damage, then a machine gun with short range and damage but was automatic, then a sniper / blaster thing with a long range and lots of damage but a much longer cooldown time. For the mini-map, it was just a raw image that was attached to a camera that followed the player around, but only had visibility to the sprite map, and I put a red dot right in the center. Under the mini-map, I displayed how many players are alive. For the full map, I just had a static camera looking over the whole map sprite, and a giant red dot that would follow the player around, and only your player would have visibility to that dot, so it would be disabled for other players. Those were the main components, everything else was tweaking and adding smaller features. The hardest thing to deal with by far was making everything work correctly with networking. This project used Photon to handle the networking, which is kind of similar to the deprecated Mirror that I used for my free Steam game Lumber Party. Definitely one of those things that is first kind of hard to understand how to handle the client and the server, but once you start with it, it kind of becomes second nature and becomes a lot easier to understand and use. Most of it was just dealing with the business logic of actually running the game properly, controlling the end states and whatnot. And yeah, that's how I made the mod. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe and like button, ring that bell, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.